I hope this makes you mad. The Japanese government values a human's life at only $3,600. This is an absolute joke. I've never been more embarrassed to be a Japanese citizen. Japan is genuinely impossible to make babies. And this is evident even to an average Japanese person like me. This video by Dr. Jonathan Tam explains beautifully why this is happening. But there's a lot I want to add onto from the inside looking out perspective as a Japanese local. I really encourage you to stay until the end of the video because what Dr. Tam says about Japan is super interesting and educational. And hopefully I can show you why exactly the policies of Japan and their way of combating the low birth rate crisis are just absolutely terrible.
Japan's population crisis is urgent. Japan just recorded fewer than 700,000 births last year. That's the lowest in their history. And the government is panicking. They're spending $25 billion a year to fix this. But nothing is working. Japan's birth crisis is fundamentally a marriage crisis. And a marriage crisis is fundamentally an economic one. And the economic crisis is fundamentally a gender crisis.
This matryoshka example is such a good way to visualize the problem of Japan. But I would change two things from Dr. Tam's explanation. One of them is that the economic crisis is the single biggest layer that hosts all the other problems. The second is that in order for other crises to not come to light, we should superglue the largest economic crisis doll so it doesn't pop out the other problems. But even though the Japanese policymakers have spent decades and trillions of yen to put superglue onto the cracks of the biggest dolls, the superglue they invested in is probably the equivalent of rubbing spit in between the cracks and hoping for the best. By the way, this is going to be a long video, so it'd be great if you could like and subscribe to my channel to see more of my content.
Japan recorded fewer than 500,000 marriages for the third year in a row in 2025, the lowest levels since 1933, when the population was half of what it is today. Japanese women face what sociologists call the M-shaped employment curve. But to a young woman in Tokyo, it doesn't look like a letter. It looks like a career-ending cliff that you're expected to walk off the moment you say, I do.
I don't want to get married.
Women start their careers after school, but a huge number quit when they have kids. Some come back later, but many don't. So when you graph this out, it looks like a giant letter M. You start your career here, you drop off here to have kids, and you try to climb back up. But in Japan, that middle dip is more like a cliff.
Putting all the pressure on women to make the choice of having children or a career is inherently wrong. This is a trend that happens all over the world, with some people blaming feminism. But at the very least in Japan, we can blame the economy. Both men and women should be able to work if they want to. Both men and women should be able to make a choice to be a homemaker if they want to. But in reality, the economic situation is so bad that neither men or women can make a choice to leave the workforce when they start having kids. Mothers need to get back to the workforce, or else it's impossible to make a living. You might be asking, where are the husbands? We'll get to them more later in the video, but they're stuck at work as well. So this is one of many catch-22s Japan created. Both parents need to work if they want to start a family. But if they start a family, one of them, usually the mother, needs to take time off and then come back to the workforce. If this is in the form of a long break from the workforce, which it ideally should be, because at least one parent should always be there for a child's developmental years, they lose skills and experience and usually get outclassed by men in a similar age, making it difficult for them to return. There's also a big segment in Dr. Tam's video about how poorly mothers get treated. And while this social or cultural problem does exist, it probably isn't as prevalent as it was compared to 10-20 years ago. I used to work in recruitment consulting in Japan, and my specialty was in HR. So I'm quite knowledgeable in companies' policies for maternity leave and child benefits. Although it's not all companies, some Japanese companies have birth benefits, in which a family can receive an added bonus for having a child. Maternity and paternity leave policies are also becoming much more generous, and the increase in remote work policies make working from home much more flexible and simple, especially for moms with young kids. This is why I said that it's not an economics and gender crisis within a marriage crisis, but it's the latter two, plus a birth crisis in an economic one.
Researchers found a magic number. Men need to earn about 3 million yen a year to afford to get married. That's $20,000.
Men need to make 3 million per year for marriage is extremely generous in my opinion. And if there are any other people living in Tokyo watching this right now, you probably agree, right? I mean, come on, the source is Japan's own government. It's like they investigated themselves and found nothing wrong.
In Tokyo, newly built condos now average over 100 million yen in the greater area as of 2025. City center units push closer to 150 million yen. Prices keep rising, with some places jumping nearly 40% in a single year. If you're renting a family-sized place, you're easily looking at 1,300 to 2,300 USD for about 500 square feet of actual living space. That's the size of a two-car garage. And when the cost to raise a child through junior high school is over $100,000, that Kuban kid face just isn't about homework anymore.
Buying a house in Tokyo can cost up to 210 million. Yet the Japanese government says, hey, if you want to get married, have kids, and start a family, you only need 3. Even if we go with a generous 100 million, that's still impossible for one person's salary. Remember, the median salary here is in the ballpark of 3.5 to 4 million. This is easy slam dunk proof that the government's estimation of 3 million is a flat out lie, because if that were true, the average Japanese person would already be married, if not considering marriage with their salary grade, when in reality, they would need to spend a lifetime of working just to afford a home. Let's play even more conservative and say housing rent is 200,000 yen for this 500 square foot apartment Dr. Tam provided. 200,000 over 12 months is 2.4 million. According to the Japanese government, the cost for a single person to get married and start a family and afford all food, utilities, education, and taxes per year is 600,000 yen. Yeah, what a shameful lie.
Now, you've probably seen the viral videos. Beautiful traditional Japanese houses for $500, sometimes free. The internet loves these stories. Just move to rural Japan and live the dream. But here's what those videos don't tell you. For most young Japanese, those homes aren't a solution. They're a form of economic exile. And there's a very specific reason nobody is actually taking them. While Japan has about 9 million vacant homes, the sad reality is career advancement only exists in cities. Some rural areas will give you a house for almost nothing.
So this is the reason why I'm saying Japan's population crisis is 100% an economic one. As Dr. Tam says, the countryside is so much more affordable. Just naming some random countryside areas of Japan. Median rent in Sendai is 50,000 yen. Gunma starts from about 40,000. Miyazaki starts from 37,000. Compare this to Tokyo's aforementioned 200,000 rent. What a steal, right? This also applies to overall living costs. I used to live in Ehime Prefecture, the countryside of Japan, and the same food in Tokyo is actually more affordable in Ehime. In fact, fruits and vegetables taste much more fresh. But this is the second catch-22 that young Japanese people face. The countryside of Japan is cheap and livable, but there's no money to make. This has been a historic problem since the 70s and 80s. Many Japanese young people go out to Tokyo from the countryside of Japan, even to this day, because the economic opportunities are all in Tokyo or the other megacities. Tokyo has been home to all the big businesses, and it still is causing this mass migration to Tokyo. But before Japan hit a tipping point with a birth rate, I think we're hitting a different tipping point. Currently, so many areas in the countryside lack decent businesses or infrastructure. Schools and train stations are all disappearing one by one. When all the young Japanese left for Tokyo a couple of decades ago, they left their parents. Now those parents aren't in their 40s and 50s. They're in their 80s and 90s. And so the rural Japan economy is so bad. It's almost non-existent. This is why it's a lose-lose situation for young Japanese people. If they move to Tokyo, they'll just drown in the rat race of working, just to barely make ends meet. But if they move to the countryside, they can live cheaply, but won't have a decent enough job. Two opposite ends of the spectrum, leading to the same result, an impossibility to start a family.
Let's talk about women first. Wives handle 5 times more housework than husbands. And here's the part that breaks the system. Even women doing a full-time job still do 25 hours of housework per week. That's 65 or more hours of labor a week, working 2 jobs, one of which doesn't have a paycheck or a lunch break, and both of which make you feel like you're failing.
Dr. Tam thinks there are 2 problems, one for men and one for women. But I think there's only one underlying issue. Our economy is so shit that both parents need to work for a family to survive. When we look at the golden era of Japan or America, the nuclear family consisted of the husband being the breadwinner and the wife being the homemaker. Now, in Japan, they're expected to do the impossible. Women have full-time jobs while being a homemaker. While men do so much overtime, they rarely ever get to see their kids. Just take a look at this clip.
But the system isn't just breaking women, it's breaking men too. Fewer than 1 in 3 fathers make it home in time for family dinner. You're technically part of the family, but you're never actually there. Your kids know your voice from phone calls, not from dinner conversations.
Arguably, the situation is sadder for Japanese mothers as well.
But here's the final variable in the math that makes family formation truly impossible. It's called double care. A growing number of workers, mostly women in their 30s and 40s, are being crushed by a simultaneous demand, providing childcare for their kids and elderly care for their parents at the same time. 1 in 10 facing that double duty quit work entirely. 8 out of 10 of those are women. When young people look at the future, they aren't just calculating the cost of diapers, they're calculating the likelihood they'll be spending their peak career years doing decades of unpaid work for 2 different generations who rely on them.
The main problem of a garbage, unlivable economy and the problems of overtime and double care just make it even worse. Japan had a thriving nuclear family system 40 years ago, but that completely flopped on its head when the nuclear family essentially got nuked. But why is it so bad? Well, my answer was the glue that was supposed to hold all the matryoshkas together. Terrible policy making.
In 2023, Prime Minister Kishida called this Japan's last chance. He said, Japan is standing on the verge of whether we can continue to function as a society. As I said earlier, the government is spending $25 billion annually on this. First, look at what they're actually trying. Families get 15,000 yen, roughly $100 per month for each child under 3. If you have 3 or more children, university is tuition free and that stipend doubles.
So let's pause here and really examine the numbers. Families get 100 USD per month for a child under the age of 3. So that is $100 times 12 months times 3 years for a grand total of $3,600 or about 500,000 yen. I hope this makes you mad. The Japanese government values a human's life at only $3,600. This is an absolute joke. I've never been more embarrassed to be a Japanese citizen. For those following along, this is about 2, maybe 3 months worth of rent in Tokyo. An entire human life that is created under the love of 2 people spends 9 months growing inside a mother and then is cared for and loved for by their family is worth 2 months worth of rent. You might be thinking, hey Chim, calm down. That's still a lot of money. Remember what Dr. Tam said, Japan is spending $25 million every year on this. My response would be Japan spends over $16 billion on foreign aid before saving itself, has trillions of dollars invested in tunnels and bridges in depopulated areas, stupidly oversized event spaces for stuff like the Tokyo Olympics that got very little money because we still decided to host the Olympics during COVID, and we have terrible corporate subsidies that waste billions every year.
They also built AI-powered matchmaking systems. Tokyo spent 300 million yen on a government dating app. 31 of Japan's 47 prefectures now offer AI matchmaking services. They're trying to get people to leave Tokyo, so the government offers 1 million yen, about $7,000, per child for families willing to move from Tokyo to rural areas.
You didn't think it would get this worse, right? They spent money to make shittier version of Tinder. Policymakers in Japan are so oblivious to the problem. The pain point isn't that dating is hard. It's that getting married and having families is so impossible because we're all too broke to afford housing and kids at the same time. What an absolute slap in the face to our entire population. Politicians think we're not having kids because we're awkward at dating, when it's their fault for creating the worst economy since World War II.
By 2022, fewer than 2,400 people had taken that deal because the jobs are in the city. They didn't update the data since then, probably because there are so few takers.
1 million yen for uprooting your entire family's life and moving to the countryside. Now, they're just spitting in our faces. We already established earlier in the video, but living in the countryside is an economic dead end. The only people who will ever move to the countryside permanently are older folks who are ready to chill out and retire, or foreigners who get baited by the cheap housing costs, none of which have young children anyways. And because of how little job opportunities there are in the countryside, if the government doesn't give enough money to literally retire a whole family in the countryside, you won't be expecting many people to move at all. Dr. Tam mentions 2,400 people, not families. If we're gonna play super conservative and say that a family consists of only a mom, dad, and one child, that is only 700 families who took this terrible deal. And let's be honest, they probably took it because they already had family that lives in the countryside, so they can just live with them or take part in the family business or something. I want to do a bit of math thing before moving to the next segment. Last year, we had approximately 670,000 newborns, which was a record low. If we do the math from the $3,600 per child policy, that's a total of $2.4 billion per year. But the Japanese government claims to be spending $25 billion annually. Genuinely, where did the rest of the money go? If there's a Japanese lawyer or politicians watching this, let me know in the comments. But this is a reason why none of us can trust our political leaders.
So if the policies are failing and the birth rates aren't coming back, does that mean the country is simply headed for a slow motion collapse? Here's where it gets interesting. To understand why Japan feels stuck, you have to look at the shape of the society. In 1980, Japan had about 7 working age people for every retiree. It was a classic population pyramid, a wide base of young workers supporting a small number of elderly. Today, that pyramid hasn't just flattened, it's inverted. It's what demographers call a coffin shape. We are currently at 1.4 workers for every retiree.
The reverse pyramid coffin is the ending blow to young Japanese workers. 9.15% of taxes get deducted from our wages just to go to social security pensions, almost 10% of our salary. This doesn't include the other taxes like income tax, residential tax, mandatory national health insurance, unemployment insurance, nursing insurance. They're even planning on introducing a tax that taxes us if we don't have kids.
Their taxes and healthcare premiums aren't building the future. They're just paying for the past. While the government spends $25 billion on babies, Japan's total social security bill runs over $1 trillion a year. The state has become a giant vacuum, draining the wealth of the young to keep the lights on for the old.
We're spending 40 times more to the elderly, who will not be giving back to the economy anytime soon. Dr. Tam might sound divisive, dividing young and old Japanese people. And in fact, there's a lot of young Japanese people who are saying, screw the elderly who are taking so much from pensions. But pensions for the elderly are actually a good thing, only on paper though. This is because when we have pensions and give money to the elderly, they will spend money back, which is good for the economy. But the truthful issue is the elderly don't spend that money.
Financially speaking, this demographic coffin keeps the economy stuck. Japanese households are sitting on nearly $14 trillion in financial assets, the majority of it controlled by people over 65, and they aren't investing it in the future. They keep it in safe bets: banks, utilities, and old-school industries. Meanwhile, the shrinking younger generation is doing the opposite. They're sending their capital out of Japan into global index funds so they can capture the high upside of future growth. This is a form of financial hollowing. The domestic economy loses its growth engine because the old money is too scared to move, and the young money is already gone.
This is called tansyokin, which directly translates to wardrobe savings. As Dr. Tam explains, old Japanese people hoard their assets, which is estimated to be worth at whopping $14 trillion. $14 trillion! Have you ever wondered why Japanese politicians never seem to care about the rising national debt? Because if we wanted to, we can pay it back in no time and still have change after. But we have $14 trillion worth of dead money that isn't being invested or spent, and just sitting in the wardrobes of the elderly elderly, with the pension taxes that get taken away from the younger generations, adding on to the wardrobes of the old people. This is a problem Japan refuses to address, but has at one point or another. Politicians have a safety net of $14 trillion they can lean on when needed, but they're not willing to bring out that money to light, and they pretend it doesn't exist. Something that needs to happen is like a better version of India's cash bills callback policy. When Modi introduced this, his very short window screwed over people, but we have a well thought out long-term policy that gives these elderly people time to voluntarily forfeit their assets by contributing to the economy through spending or investing, we can actually get the Japanese economy moving again. Maybe after we settle the national debt first though. But something this radical will never happen from the hard-headed policymakers of Japan. I mean, come on. These are the same people that thought launching a worse version of Tinder would save the national birth crisis. To conclude, I'm noticing that the smart or wealthy Japanese people aren't migrating from the countryside to Tokyo anymore. They're migrating from Tokyo to overseas and giving up in Japan for a better life. This is a sad reality, and recent conversations from young people are if they'll be stuck in Japan or escape it before it sinks. On a positive note, there are still many inspiring young Japanese people who are fighting for the country, but this is generations worth of damage. So if we want to fix it, we all need to step up. I'm not an economist or politician, and I'm not pretending to be like one. But I think it's evident from the economic bubble bursting and the sheer amount of people moving away from the countryside to Tokyo that this crisis would happen. It genuinely doesn't take a genius to foresee this, and Japanese politicians aren't stupid. They were just too slow and too unwilling to take big risks. Imagine if we told big businesses in Tokyo to build offices in the countryside. They would take their businesses to rural areas, meaning they will need workers in rural areas, and with the increase of people, there will be new schools, stores, stations, new businesses to support this increase in people. Imagine if Japan gave more chances from small to mid-sized businesses to make them grow instead of taxing the hell out of them. Imagine if Japan gave more entrepreneurship opportunities to young people. Instead, Japan has been so backwards, dunking young people in an old and outdated culture that tells them to compete in a shitty rat race and get good grades, go to a good university, and get a job in Tokyo, only for them to never be able to get married, have a family, and be happy. If you got this far in the video, thank you. And let me know in the comments how you felt. Hopefully you learned something new, and it would be great if you could subscribe to my channel. I'm still a very small creator, so I would really appreciate one person subscribing. Every subscriber's count. So yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!